I had always prided myself on being a good neighbor. When I moved into my new apartment complex, I made it a point to introduce myself to everyone on my floor. Most were friendly enough, exchanging pleasantries and sharing stories about the area. But then there were the Thompsons, an enigmatic couple who seemed to exist in a world all their own. From the moment I first laid eyes on them, something felt off. They lived in the unit directly across from mine, and while I would occasionally catch glimpses of them through the frosted glass of their balcony door, they rarely ventured outside. Their curtains were perpetually drawn, casting an air of secrecy that piqued my curiosity. It wasn't just their reclusive nature, it was the odd hours they kept. I often heard muffled voices late at night, accompanied by the soft hum of machinery that echoed through the thin walls. As weeks passed, I found myself increasingly drawn to their mystery. I had heard whispers from other neighbors about the Thompsons' peculiar habits, how they were rumored to be involved in some sort of unconventional research. Some claimed they were scientists, others suggested something more sinister. My imagination ran wild with possibilities, each one more outlandish than the last. One evening, as I returned home from work, I noticed a strange light flickering from their balcony. It was a deep blue hue that pulsed rhythmically, casting eerie shadows across the hallway. My heart raced with a mix of fear and intrigue. What could they possibly be doing? My mind conjured images of secret experiments or bizarre rituals conducted under the cover of night. Curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate further. Over the next few days, I began to pay closer attention to their routines. They rarely left their apartment during daylight hours, but seemed to be active during the night. Their door would occasionally open, revealing glimpses of strange equipment stacked haphazardly in their living room, what appeared to be medical devices and monitors that looked like they belonged in a lab rather than a home. One night, emboldened by my growing fascination and perhaps a touch of recklessness, I decided to knock on their door. The sound echoed down the empty hallway, and for a moment I felt foolish for even considering it. But before I could turn back, the door creaked open slightly. A tall figure emerged from the shadows, a man with disheveled hair and dark circles under his eyes. He wore a lab coat that looked like it had seen better days, and had an unsettling smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth yet somehow unsettling. "I'm your neighbor," I stammered, pointing to my own door just down the hall. "I've seen you around and thought I'd say hi." He nodded slowly, but didn't invite me in or ask me to sit down. Instead, he glanced behind him as if expecting someone else to appear at any moment. "Nice to meet you," he said finally. "We're just busy with research." Research, the word slipped out before I could stop myself. "Yes," he replied cryptically. "Sleep research." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite myself. "What kind of sleep research?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's complicated. We study dreams, how they affect people's waking lives." The way he spoke sent chills down my spine. There was something almost predatory about his tone. "That sounds interesting," I managed to say, trying to mask my unease. "It is," he replied with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "But it requires volunteers." I felt a shiver run through me at his words. There was something about his gaze that felt invasive, as if he were assessing me not just as a neighbor but as a potential subject for whatever experiments they were conducting behind closed doors. "Well, if you ever need help or anything," I trailed off awkwardly. "Thank you," he said, his smile widening unnaturally as he stepped back into the shadows of his apartment. "We might just take you up on that offer." As he closed the door, a sense of foreboding washed over me. What kind of research required volunteers, and why did it feel like they were already watching me? That night, sleep eluded me as my mind raced with questions and fears about my neighbors' intentions. The muffled sounds from their apartment seemed louder than ever, the whirring machines and hushed conversations blending into an unsettling symphony that played on repeat in my head. Little did I know that this was only the beginning, a mere prelude to what awaited me in the depths of their dark web experiments. This segment introduces key elements of suspense and intrigue while establishing an unsettling atmosphere around your neighbors and hinting at darker themes to come in future segments. The days that followed my encounter with the Thompsons were a blur of anxiety and curiosity. I found myself hyper-aware of their presence, listening intently for any signs of activity from their apartment. The once mundane sounds of life, footsteps, laughter, even the occasional argument, were replaced by an eerie silence punctuated by the low hum of machinery. It was as if they had retreated further into their world, leaving me to wonder what went on behind those closed doors. One evening, unable to shake my unease, I decided to do some light research on sleep studies. I sat at my kitchen table, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows across the room. I stumbled upon various articles discussing the importance of sleep and its impact on mental health. But as I delved deeper, I found darker corners of the internet forums, where people shared tales of bizarre sleep experiments and unethical practices conducted by shadowy figures in the name of science. My heart raced as I read about individuals who had volunteered for sleep studies only to find themselves subjected to nightmarish conditions, deprivation, manipulation of dreams, and even psychological torment. It was a chilling reminder of how easily curiosity could lead one down a dark path. That night I couldn't help but feel paranoid. I heard faint whispers coming from the Thompsons' apartment, muffled yet distinct. It was late, well past midnight, and it felt as though they were conducting some sort of clandestine meeting. My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to catch snippets of their conversation. The results are promising, a voice said. Smooth and confident, definitely, Mr. Thompson. Are you sure we can trust them, came a woman's voice, likely Mrs. Thompson. What if they find out what we're really doing? I pulled back abruptly, my breath hitching in my throat. What were they discussing? The words results and trust echoed ominously in my mind. I felt like an intruder in their world, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something much larger than myself. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. My mind kept drifting back to those whispered conversations and the strange blue light that flickered from their balcony at night. During lunch break, I decided to take a walk around the building, hoping to catch another glimpse of their activities. As I strolled past their unit, I noticed the door slightly ajar, a rare opportunity that felt too tempting to resist. My heart raced as I glanced around to ensure no one was watching before pushing it open just enough to peek inside. The living room was dimly lit by an array of screens that lined one wall, each displaying different patterns and colors that shifted hypnotically. In the center stood a large bed surrounded by an assortment of medical equipment, electrodes, monitors, and what looked like a high-tech sleep mask resting on a pillow. I held my breath as I took in the sight. It felt like stepping into a sci-fi horror movie, a place where nightmares were born rather than dreams nurtured. Suddenly, a noise startled me. I quickly ducked back behind the door, just as Mrs. Thompson stepped into view. She looked disheveled and tired, her hair unkempt and dark circles under her eyes betraying her lack of sleep. She moved with an unsettling grace toward one of the screens and began typing furiously on a keyboard. Data collection is crucial, she muttered under her breath. We can't afford any mistakes. I felt an icy chill run down my spine at her words. What kind of data were they collecting? And why did it seem so urgent? As if sensing my presence, she paused for a moment and glanced toward the door. My heart raced as I held my breath. Had she seen me? After what felt like an eternity, she returned her focus to the screens. Taking advantage of her distraction, I quietly slipped away from their door and hurried back to my apartment, my mind racing with questions. That night was restless sleep evaded me once again as images of their bizarre setup haunted my thoughts. The flickering blue light outside their balcony seemed more ominous than ever as it cast eerie shadows across my walls. Days turned into weeks as this strange game continued a dance between curiosity and dread. Each night brought new revelations about the Thompsons' research through hushed conversations overheard or glimpses into their apartment when they left their door ajar. One evening after work, while preparing dinner in my kitchen, I heard an urgent knock at my door. Startled, I wiped my hands on a towel before opening it cautiously. To my surprise, it was Mr. Thompson standing there with an intense look on his face. "Good evening," he said too cheerfully for someone who seemed so frazzled earlier in our last encounter. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "No," I replied hesitantly. "What's up?" "I wanted to talk about our research," he said, his eyes glinting with excitement mixed with something darker beneath the surface. Okay, my pulse quickened. This wasn't how I imagined this conversation going. "I think you'd be perfect for our next study," he continued without waiting for my response. "You've shown interest already. You could help us gather valuable data." My stomach dropped at his words. "What kind of study?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially, as if sharing a secret meant only for me. "It's about understanding how dreams can be manipulated to enhance creativity and problem-solving skills." I forced a smile despite feeling trapped in his gaze, those eyes that seemed to pierce through me with unsettling clarity. That sounds interesting. It is, he insisted eagerly. And you'd be compensated handsomely for your time. Compensation? The thought danced tantalizingly in my mind, but was quickly overshadowed by dread creeping back. And what would this involve? What price would come with participating in their dark web experiments? As he continued speaking about potential benefits and outcomes, all I could think about was how easily curiosity could lead me down a path from which there might be no return. This segment builds tension while providing more context about the Thompsons' activities and deepening your protagonist's internal conflict regarding involvement in their research. The days that followed Mr. Thompson's unexpected proposal were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Part of me was terrified at the thought of becoming involved in their research, while another part was intrigued by the promise of compensation and the allure of uncovering the mysteries surrounding their work. I found myself oscillating between dread and curiosity, caught in a web spun by my own fascination with the unknown. Eventually, I succumbed to my curiosity. After all, how dangerous could it be? I convinced myself that participating in their study would merely be an opportunity to observe their peculiar methods up close. So, one evening, I knocked on their door, my heart pounding in my chest. Mrs. Thompson answered, her expression a mix of surprise and delight. "Oh, you came," she exclaimed, stepping aside to let me in. The interior of their apartment was even stranger than I had imagined, dimly lit and filled with an array of high-tech equipment that hummed softly, as if alive. "Welcome to our lab," Mr. Thompson said with a grin that sent shivers down my spine. "We're thrilled you decided to join us." I forced a smile as I stepped inside, trying to ignore the sense of foreboding that clung to me like a shadow. The living room was cluttered with monitors displaying colorful graphs and swirling patterns, while various devices lined the walls, some resembling medical instruments, others looking like something out of a sci-fi movie. "Please, have a seat," Mrs. Thompson offered, gesturing toward a reclined chair placed in front of one of the screens. "We'll begin with a simple questionnaire to assess your sleep patterns." As I settled into the chair, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into something much larger than myself. A sense of unease settled over me as they handed me a tablet filled with questions about my sleep habits, dreams, and overall mental health. I answered them honestly, but felt increasingly uncomfortable with each passing moment. "Now," Mr. Thompson said as he reviewed my responses, "we'll move on to the next phase." He gestured toward a sleek device resembling a sleep mask. "This will help us monitor your brain activity while you sleep." My stomach twisted at the thought of being monitored so closely. "Is it safe?" I asked hesitantly. "Completely," Mrs. Thompson assured me with an unsettling enthusiasm. "We've conducted this study multiple times with great success." Reluctantly, I agreed to wear the device that night. They instructed me to return at midnight for my first session, a time when they claimed my brain would be most active during REM sleep. As midnight approached, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread gnawing at my insides. The Thompsons had set up an elaborate sleeping area in their living room, a bed surrounded by monitors and strange equipment that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. "Just relax," Mr. Thompson said as he adjusted the sleep mask over my eyes. "We'll take care of everything." With that, they dimmed the lights and left me alone in their lab-like environment. As darkness enveloped me, I felt an odd sensation wash over me, a blend of anxiety and curiosity that made it hard to breathe. Drifting off into sleep felt like falling into an abyss where reality blurred with dreams. The first few moments were peaceful, then gradually vivid images began to swirl around me, faces from my past mixed with strange landscapes that shifted and morphed into nightmarish forms. I awoke suddenly, gasping for breath as panic surged through me. The monitors around me flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could hear faint whispers echoing through the darkness, words I couldn't quite make out but felt deeply unsettling. "Is it working?" Mrs. Thompson's voice broke through the haze as she entered the room. "What's happening?" I asked breathlessly, still disoriented from my dreams. "We're collecting data," she replied calmly, her eyes glinting with excitement. "You're experiencing heightened REM activity. This is fantastic." I sat up slowly, trying to shake off the remnants of my dream while feeling increasingly uneasy about their enthusiasm. "But what does it mean?" "It means you're responding well," Mr. Thompson chimed in from behind her. "We can manipulate your dreams further for our study." Manipulate? The word sent chills down my spine as I realized how little control I had over this situation. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that, I stammered. Oh, don't worry, Mrs. Thompson said dismissively, waving her hand as if brushing away my concerns. It's all part of the process. You'll be amazed at what we can uncover together. Over the next few nights, I returned for more sessions, each one more intense than the last. The Thompsons guided me through bizarre dreamscapes where they encouraged me to confront fears and desires buried deep within my subconscious. Each experience left me feeling drained, yet strangely exhilarated. But soon enough, things began to take a darker turn. During one session, something felt off, like an invisible weight pressing down on me as I drifted into sleep. The dreams morphed into twisted nightmares filled with grotesque imagery, shadowy figures lurking just beyond reach, and whispers that echoed my deepest insecurities. I jolted awake again to find Mrs. Thompson standing by my bedside, her expression unnervingly calm despite my distress. "Are you all right?" she asked sweetly. "No," I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. That dream, it was terrifying. She smiled softly, but there was something unsettling about it, something predatory lurking beneath her facade of concern. "It's all part of your journey," she said soothingly. "Embrace it." I couldn't shake off the feeling that they were feeding off my fear, that somehow this was more than just research, it was an experiment designed to push boundaries beyond what was ethical or safe. As days turned into weeks, I found myself trapped in their web, a pawn in their dark game where reality intertwined with nightmares in ways I couldn't comprehend. The Thompsons' obsession with manipulating dreams became increasingly apparent. They seemed more focused on pushing limits than ensuring my well-being. One night after another particularly harrowing session where shadows danced across my mind like phantoms from hell itself, I finally snapped. "I can't do this anymore," I shouted as soon as they entered after monitoring my session. "Why not?" Mr. Thompson asked incredulously, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to gauge whether I was serious or merely playing coy. "This isn't research, it's torture." My voice trembled with pent-up fear and frustration. Mrs. Thompson stepped closer, her demeanor shifted from concerned scientist to something colder, more calculating. "You don't understand," she said softly but firmly. "You're contributing to something groundbreaking." Groundbreaking, my voice rose incredulously as anger surged within me, like fire igniting dry tinder. "Yes," she continued without missing a beat, her eyes glinting dangerously now under dim lights illuminating their lab-like space around us, a place where sanity seemed tenuous at best amid flickering screens, showcasing distorted images reflecting back at us like mirrors warped by madness itself. "You're just afraid because you've never experienced anything like this before," Mr. Thompson added smoothly, his tone dripping with condescension masked by faux concern for someone who dared challenge them. I took a step back instinctively. Their presence loomed larger than life itself, a force threatening to consume everything familiar until only shadows remained. "I need time away from this," I declared defiantly, despite feeling small against their overwhelming energy radiating through every fiber surrounding us. "We can't allow you leave now," Mrs. Thompson stated matter-of-factly, a statement devoid any empathy or compassion, only cold calculation beneath layers painted over smiles meant to deceive. Panic surged through me again. Realization dawned upon me. I was trapped, a mere pawn caught between two players whose only goal seemed to unravel secrets hidden deep within minds, willing to sacrifice sanity for knowledge gained through dark means. This segment escalates the tension significantly as your protagonist becomes more deeply involved in the Thompsons' experiments while grappling with fear and manipulation. The atmosphere in the Thompsons' apartment shifted dramatically after my outburst. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, thick enough to suffocate. Mrs. Thompson's eyes narrowed, and Mr. Thompson's smile faded into a tight-lipped line that spoke volumes about their displeasure. "You don't understand what you're involved in," Mr. Thompson said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can just walk away? This is bigger than you or us." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Thompson took a step closer, her demeanor shifting from that of a concerned researcher to something more predatory. "We are on the brink of a breakthrough," she said, her voice smooth yet laced with an unsettling intensity. "Your mind is a treasure trove of untapped potential. We need to explore it further." "Explore it?" I echoed incredulously. "You mean exploit it?" "This isn't research, it's manipulation." Mr. Thompson chuckled darkly, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and something darker. "Call it what you will, but you agreed to participate. You're already too deep to turn back now." Panic surged within me as I realized how true his words were. I had willingly stepped into their world, lured by curiosity and the promise of discovery. But now I felt like a moth drawn to a flame, one that was about to be consumed. "Let me go," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. Mrs. Thompson shook her head slowly, her expression unreadable. "You don't understand how important this is," she said softly but firmly. "We're not just studying dreams, we're trying to unlock the secrets of consciousness itself." "What does that even mean?" I shot back, my heart racing. "It means we can manipulate reality," Mr. Thompson interjected, his voice rising with excitement. "Imagine being able to control your dreams, your fears, your very thoughts. You could become anything you desire." "But at what cost?" I countered, feeling a surge of defiance. "Cost?" Mrs. Thompson laughed lightly, but there was an edge to it that sent shivers down my spine. "You're thinking too small. This is about evolution, about transcending human limitations." They were lost in their vision, their obsession blinding them to the moral implications of what they were doing. My instinct screamed at me to escape while I still could, but fear rooted me in place. "Tonight," Mr. Thompson continued, ignoring my protests, "we'll take things up a notch." "What do you mean?" I asked warily. "We'll enhance your experience," he said with an unsettling grin that sent chills through me. Before I could protest further, they ushered me back into the dimly lit room filled with monitors and strange equipment. The bed was made up again, surrounded by devices that hummed ominously like a swarm of angry bees. "Just relax," Mrs. Thompson said as she adjusted the sleep mask over my eyes once more. "This will be unlike anything you've ever experienced." As they prepared for the session, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, a realization that I was no longer in control of my own mind or body. The mask tightened around my head as darkness enveloped me once again. The moment I drifted off to sleep, I was thrust into a whirlwind of chaos, a cacophony of sounds and images swirling around me like a storm threatening to consume everything in its path. I found myself standing in an endless void where shadows danced just beyond reach, figures morphing into grotesque shapes that taunted me with whispers echoing my deepest fears: failure, betrayal, loss. Suddenly I was back in my childhood home, a place filled with warmth and laughter, but it quickly twisted into a nightmare as shadows crept along the walls, darkening everything they touched. "Help!" I screamed as I ran through familiar halls that now felt foreign and threatening. But no one answered, only silence echoed back at me, a reminder of isolation and despair. Just when I thought I would be consumed by darkness, a blinding light pierced through the void, a beacon calling me back to reality. I jolted awake again, gasping for breath as reality crashed back around me, the monitors flickering wildly as if reflecting my turmoil. Mrs. Thompson stood over me, her expression one of intense focus mixed with something resembling delight. "You did wonderfully," she exclaimed. "What just happened?" I gasped, still reeling from the intensity of the experience. "You faced your fears," she replied with an unsettling smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And we captured every moment." Mr. Thompson leaned closer, his voice low and conspiratorial. "We're on the verge of something incredible. You have no idea how valuable this data will be." "Data?" My mind raced as panic set in again. They were treating my nightmares as mere numbers on a screen, rather than acknowledging the psychological toll it was taking on me. "I need to leave," I insisted again, this time with more conviction. But they exchanged glances, one filled with understanding laced with something darker beneath the surface, and then Mrs. Thompson spoke. "Not yet." Without warning, Mr. Thompson pressed a button on one of the nearby consoles. The screens flickered violently before displaying images from my most recent dream, shadows creeping along familiar hallways, distorted faces twisted in agony, echoes of screams resonating through every fiber within me. "No," I shouted in horror as realization dawned upon me. They were using my own nightmares against me. "This is just the beginning," Mrs. Thompson said softly yet chillingly, her voice dripping honeyed sweetness while masking venomous intent lurking beneath. I felt trapped like prey caught between two predators intent on extracting every ounce of fear from within. "Let's enhance your experience even further," Mr. Thompson declared gleefully as he began adjusting settings on another device connected directly to my mask. Panic surged through me again. I had become nothing more than an experiment, a subject trapped within their twisted game where reality blurred with nightmares until all sense of self began unraveling. "No," I screamed desperately as darkness threatened to engulf me once more, but before I could protest further, the world around me shattered into fragments like glass breaking under pressure. This segment intensifies the horror as your protagonist realizes the true nature of their involvement. and faces increasingly disturbing experiences orchestrated by the Thompsons. The world around me fractured into a kaleidoscope of nightmares as the Thompsons prepared to heighten my experience. I felt the mask tighten around my face, and panic surged through me like a tidal wave. The air grew thick with tension, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out all rational thought. "Let's see how deep we can go," Mr. Thompson said, his voice dripping with excitement. "You're about to experience true liberation." "Liberation?" I echoed, my voice trembling. "This isn't liberation, it's madness." But before I could voice another protest, darkness enveloped me once more, swallowing me whole. I was thrust back into the void, but this time it was different, more chaotic, more oppressive. Shadows twisted and writhed around me, whispering secrets in a language I couldn't understand. Suddenly I found myself in a vast expanse filled with flickering images of my past, moments of joy twisted into scenes of despair. I saw my childhood home again, but it was burning now, flames licking at the walls while shadows danced in the firelight. The laughter that once filled those halls turned to screams, echoing in my ears as if the very walls were alive with pain. "Help!" I cried out, but my voice was swallowed by the cacophony of horrors surrounding me. In this nightmarish landscape, I felt myself being pulled deeper into the darkness, a force beyond my control dragging me toward an abyss where all hope seemed lost. Just when I thought I would be consumed by despair, a flicker of resistance ignited within me. "No!" I shouted defiantly against the encroaching shadows. "You won't take me." With that declaration, a surge of energy coursed through me, a primal instinct to fight against the darkness that sought to engulf my very essence. The shadows recoiled momentarily as if stung by my defiance. In that fleeting moment of clarity, I realized that this was not just a battle for my mind. It was a struggle for my soul. The Thompsons had twisted my fears against me, but they underestimated my will to survive. I focused on a single memory, a moment of pure happiness when I had felt truly alive. Standing on a beach at sunset, waves crashing against the shore as laughter filled the air. That image illuminated my mind like a beacon in the darkness. As I concentrated on that memory, the shadows began to dissipate around me. The flames of despair flickered and faded until all that remained was light, a warm glow that enveloped me like a protective cocoon. "Get out!" I screamed into the void, channeling every ounce of strength within me. "You have no power over me." With each word, the darkness retreated further until it dissolved completely. Suddenly, I was back in the Thompsons' apartment, my heart racing as reality crashed down around me like a wave. I sat up abruptly in their living room, gasping for breath as if emerging from deep water after being submerged for too long. The monitors flickered wildly around me, displaying chaotic patterns that mirrored my racing thoughts. Mrs. Thompson stood nearby with an expression of disbelief etched across her face. "What just happened?" she demanded, her voice laced with confusion. "I broke free," I said defiantly as I rose from the bed. "You can't control me anymore." Mr. Thompson stepped forward, his demeanor shifting from excitement to anger. "You don't understand what you've done. We were so close." "Close to what?" I shot back, feeling emboldened by my newfound strength. "To destroying someone's mind for your sick experiments? You think you can just walk away?" he hissed, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "I'm not your lab rat," I shouted back as adrenaline surged through me. "I won't be part of your twisted game any longer." With that declaration echoing in the air between us like thunderclaps reverberating through stillness, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Tension hung thick enough to slice through. In a moment of desperation, fueled by instinct, I turned on my heels and bolted toward the door. But before I could reach it, Mrs. Thompson lunged forward with surprising speed, her hands reaching out as if trying to ensnare me within grasp. "Stop!" she commanded, but her voice held no authority, only desperation tinged with something darker lurking beneath surface. I dodged her grasp narrowly, my heart racing as adrenaline propelled me forward. Bursting through their door, I sprinted down the hallway, my footsteps echoing against cold tile floors, every ounce of fear fueling determination to escape this nightmare once and for all. As I reached the stairwell, I could hear their voices trailing behind me, shouting threats mingled with pleas. But nothing could deter me now. I raced down flight after flight, until finally bursting through exit door into cool night air. The world outside felt surreal after being trapped within their dark web for so long. Gasping for breath, I stumbled onto the street, heart pounding wildly against ribcage like war drums signaling victory over oppressive forces, trying to consume everything good within. But even as relief washed over me, I knew this wasn't truly over. Shadows lingered just beyond reach, a reminder that darkness never truly disappears. It merely waits for opportunity to strike again. In those moments spent fleeing from nightmare, I realized something profound. The true battle lies not just within dreams, but also within ourselves. The power we hold to confront fears head-on, rather than allow them dictate our lives. As dawn broke on horizon painting sky shades pink and gold, I vowed never again let fear control fate. Instead, I would embrace light shining brightly even amidst darkest nights. And so, with each step forward into new day, I carried with me strength forged through trials faced, the knowledge that while nightmares may come, they could never truly define who we are, unless we let them. This final segment brings resolution to your horror story while emphasizing themes of empowerment and resilience against fear and manipulation. Thank you for allowing me to assist you in crafting this unique narrative. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the city as I stumbled away from the Thompsons' apartment. My heart still raced, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I tried to process everything that had just happened. The cool morning air felt refreshing against my skin, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of their lab-like home. As I walked through the quiet streets, I felt a mix of relief and dread. I had escaped their clutches, but the memories of those harrowing nights haunted me like ghosts refusing to let go. Each step away from their building felt like a small victory, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that the Thompsons were still watching, lurking in the shadows. I arrived at my apartment, locking the door behind me as if it would shield me from any lingering darkness. The familiar surroundings felt comforting, but also suffocating. I needed to process what had happened, to reclaim my life from the chaos that had engulfed me. For days, I tried to return to normalcy, going to work, meeting friends, and engaging in mundane activities. But every time I closed my eyes, flashes of my nightmares invaded my thoughts. The shadows danced behind my eyelids, whispering secrets that threatened to pull me back into their abyss. Desperate for answers and closure, I began researching sleep studies and psychological manipulation. I wanted to understand what had happened to me and how I could protect myself from ever falling into such a trap again. The more I learned about unethical practices in psychological research, the more determined I became to expose those who exploited vulnerable individuals for their own gain. One evening, as I sat in front of my laptop surrounded by stacks of books and articles, a notification popped up on my screen. It was an email from an anonymous source with the subject line, "The Thompsons." My heart raced as I clicked it open. The message contained detailed information about the couple, how they had been running underground experiments on unsuspecting participants for years, luring them in with promises of self-discovery and enlightenment. Their methods were not only unethical but also dangerous. Many subjects had reported lasting psychological damage after participating in their studies. I felt a mix of anger and fear as I read through the accounts of others who had fallen victim to their manipulative tactics. It was clear that they were not just researchers. They were predators, hiding behind a facade of scientific inquiry. With newfound resolve, I decided to take action. I gathered evidence from various sources, testimonials from former participants, and documentation of their experiments, and compiled it into a comprehensive report. My goal was to expose the Thompsons for who they truly were, charlatans preying on those seeking help. After weeks of relentless research and writing, I finally submitted my findings to local authorities and several media outlets. It was time for their reign of terror to end. Days turned into weeks as I waited anxiously for a response. The fear that they would retaliate loomed over me like a dark cloud. But deep down, I knew that exposing them was the right thing to do. It was a way to reclaim my power and help others who might be caught in their web. Then one morning, as I scrolled through news articles over coffee, my heart skipped a beat when I saw a headline: "Local couple arrested for unethical psychological experiments." The article detailed how authorities had raided their apartment after receiving multiple complaints about their practices. It included testimonies from former participants who bravely came forward after seeing my report. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. Justice was finally being served. But even as I celebrated this small victory, shadows lingered at the edges of my mind, a reminder that darkness never truly disappears. It merely waits for another opportunity to strike. In the following weeks, life began to return to normalcy. With the Thompsons behind bars, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. However, there were still moments when fear crept back in, when shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, or when silence enveloped me too tightly. To combat this lingering anxiety, I sought therapy, an essential step toward healing from the trauma inflicted upon me during those harrowing nights. My therapist helped me unpack my experiences and taught me techniques to cope with anxiety and nightmares. As time passed, I found strength in sharing my story with others, speaking at local events about mental health awareness and advocating against unethical practices in psychological research. Each time I shared my experience, it felt like another layer of darkness lifted from my soul. Yet every now and then, late at night when shadows stretched across my walls and silence wrapped around me like a shroud, I would feel an echo of fear whispering through the corridors of my mind. What if they returned? What if there were others like them? But instead of succumbing to that fear, I chose resilience. Each day became an affirmation that light can pierce through even the darkest nights. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had transpired, I stood by my window gazing out at the city bathed in moonlight, a soft breeze brushing against me. A reminder that life continues despite darkness lurking just beyond reach. And then it hit me. The true essence of strength lies not just in overcoming fear, but also embracing vulnerability, allowing ourselves open up rather than shutting down. With renewed determination, I vowed never again let fear dictate choices. Instead, I would forge ahead into unknown territories guided by light illuminating paths toward healing. As dawn broke on yet another day filled with possibilities waiting unfold, I smiled softly, knowing that while shadows may linger, they could never extinguish fire burning brightly within. This final segment brings resolution, while emphasizing themes of empowerment, resilience, and healing after trauma. Thank you for allowing me to assist you in crafting this unique narrative.